All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. Now, we're going to try a little bit different format here today. We're going to do something a little bit different than what we've usually been doing. I'm going to break this segment into a number of small things that I see people getting wrong. We're going to call this stupid mistakes that smart people make in public relations. So we're going to break down a lot of the mistakes that I see smart people making that ends up hurting them in their PR efforts. And I've seen this from people who are trying to DIY their own PR. I've also seen it from, in some cases, other publicists. So, just because somebody works in this industry does not mean that they're immune to some of the mistakes that people make. Definitely, you want to look out for these things. You want to avoid them because they will have a negative impact for you. And in a lot of cases, it's not just hey, I made a mistake and, I learned something from that. Now it's over with. In a lot of cases, these mistakes can have long lasting impact. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So the first one we're going to talk about is buying media features. Now, there's a lot of different ways that this could happen. You guys may have seen, I see this all the time where somebody will put out an ad on Facebook and it's like, oh, get featured in such and such for $97. And those are 100% of the time bullshit. But there's other ways that people go about this. And one of them is there's this entire network. I won't name the specific network, but there's an entire network of websites that are designed to look like a lot of the news sites that you already know, trust, and recognize. There's a particular one that I use in some of my presentations as an example, and it looks similar to Rolling Stone magazine, but it is not Rolling Stone magazine. In this particular case, I forget what they called it. Oh, they called this one the Music Observer, right? Now, if you go look at the actual Rolling Stone magazine, they get upwards of, I think it was, 15, 20 million views a month, right? Very, very large number. It's a website that gets a lot of traffic. It's a website that people know and recognize. Whereas this other one that is trying to look like Rolling Stone, it just gets a few hundred visitors a month. And I would have to suspect that all of those visitors are the people that paid money to be in it. They're just going to see, themselves in the article and then, maybe the people that they shared that link with. So this is a problem for a few different reasons. One of them is if you're paying money to be featured in this as a way to build your exposure and your authority, you're throwing your money away because you're not actually building any exposure because there's no traffic there. And you're not building any authority because it's not actually that particular outlet that people are familiar with and trust, right? It's just some random site that people are paying money to be listed in. And when you look at the content of these sites, you can typically tell, right? There's certain things that you're looking for. First of all, if you have access to certain tools, there's, various tools that we used back in the SEO industry when I was in that field, where you can actually look at the traffic data for a website. And there's a variety of free tools. There's a variety of paid tools, but that's a good place to start, right? You look at that, and if the site does not get much traffic, then it's a pretty safe bet that it's not actually, a trustworthy, authoritative site, especially if it's trying to look like a different site, right? That's already that's the deal breaker right there. But if you're not sure, right, if it just looks like a news site or an authoritative publication, you can always look at the traffic that it's generating. Another thing you can do is look at the authors. So do these authors actually exist? On a real publication, you're going to see, it'll have an author's name, first and last name. It's not going to say author or admin or something like that. It's going to actually have a real person, a name, first and last. It'll typically have a profile picture. And if it doesn't have these things, that should be a huge red flag for you. So what you want to do is look up that author, right? Just because there's a name there, it doesn't mean anything, but look up that author and see if that person exists outside of that website. Because if they don't, then that's probably a pretty big red flag. Now, why does this matter? Well, this matters because journalists hate these sites. First of all, they feel that it lacks integrity, and in all honesty, it absolutely does. It's not a legitimate site. You're using it to try and misrepresent something. So yes, they're correct. They also feel that it cuts into their livelihood. And look, we've all got that mindset in some way, shape, or form, right? We don't want things that are going to take away from what we think we're working towards. So these sites, they're basically flooding the internet with garbage, right? It's, spam, not spam in the technical sense, but spam in the sense of there's no real value, right? It's fluff. It's something that somebody paid to have produced. It's not really editorial, right? There's not an editor confirming that this information is real. There's nobody looking at anything. It's just you pay this fee, and it's typically a fairly small fee, and somebody will publish this story about you with no fact checking, no proof, no evidence, no nothing. And so journalists hate this for those reasons. But because of that, if they see that you're spending money to go get featured in these fake publications, they're going to have a negative view of you, and you're likely not going to get featured, even if you're coming to them with a legitimate story, right? You could have been running a great business, doing everything right. But if they find you in these types of publications, then what happens is you've damaged your credibility with them, and that makes it more difficult to actually get that feature. So this is a huge problem. I see so many people fall into this trap because they think, oh, well, hey, I'll just do it now, and then later I'll focus on getting real ones, right? When my name is big enough, when I'm out there and people want to cover me. And that's the wrong way to look at it, because you have to operate in integrity. And if you think you're going to do something now, you're going to take some shortcuts now, I promise you that when you get down the road, you're going to want to take shortcuts too. And that's going to hurt you in the long run. So just avoid that. It's pure trash, brings no value, and it will hurt you both in the short term and in the long term, because it's not going to give you any kind of benefit whatsoever in the short term, but you are going to get that long-term hurt. So avoid it. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is automating follow-up. So I know we all love to find ways to streamline our workflow, especially the tedious, boring tasks. But this is not something that you want to do when you're following up with a journalist, because look, they already get a ton of email. You guys get a ton of email, right? We all get them. I get hammered by these lead gen people all the time. We get, hey, quick question. How many of you guys are sick of seeing that subject line? I get that all the time. But then I get this string of, hey, just following up. Hey, in case this got buried. Hey, maybe now is not a good time, but what do you think about XYZ? And they just keep automating the hell out of it. A lot of people will make the mistake of doing that with journalists as well. And that's a big problem, because first of all, journalists are getting way more email than you or I in most cases. They get more email than you could possibly imagine. So by setting up an automation, you're adding to that, and that's going to piss them off. I promise you, because I hear them talk about it all the time. But the other side of this is, if you sent them a pitch and they didn't reply, I promise you, 99.9% of the time, it's not because, they just didn't see your email. It's because it wasn't a fit. And that doesn't mean it was a bad story. It doesn't mean they hate you. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means that story was not a fit right now. Now, you have to keep in mind, if that story is not a fit right now, sending another email is not going to change that. Sending 5 more emails is not going to change that. Nothing is going to change that except for the circumstances changing. So what you have to think about is, every journalist has what's called a beat, right? A topic that they cover. So your story has to align with that, first of all. Then they've also got assignments and deadlines. So their editor is going to be telling them, in a lot of cases, what they have to write about. They may tell them, hey, I want you to write about this story that just came out. I want you to write about this new law that's going through Congress, or we need you to talk about this new product that hit the market and how it's going to affect things, whatever. But they are being given specific assignments that they have to cover. So if you send them an email for a story, and they don't respond, it's most likely because either it's not in alignment with their beat, their topic that they normally cover, or it's not something that they can fit in right now because they've got other assignments already from their editor. So if you continue to hammer them with emails, and this is true whether it's automated or manual, if you're continuing to follow up, what's going to happen is they're going to get annoyed by you, and they will do one of two things. They will either just start throwing all your emails away, which over time, that will cause whatever email platform they're using, whether it's G Suite, whether it's Outlook, whatever they're using, that activity over time will cause the filters that go on in the background that you don't even see, right? Not a manual filter that somebody set up, but an algorithmic filter. That email platform will start putting your email straight into the spam folder. Once that starts happening on a large scale, then a lot more of your emails, even fresh emails to fresh people, will start going into the spam folder. And that's a bad thing. So even if that doesn't happen, one of the other things they may do is they may just set up a filter where everything that comes from you automatically goes to junk or automatically goes to the trash. I've got a lot of people. So in my case, obviously you guys know I'm a publicist, but I'm also a journalist. I write for several media outlets, and I get hammered all the time because I write for numerous large publications, Entrepreneur, Newsmax, Benzinga, several of these major outlets. And so my name, my email address, it's all in databases all over the place. So people will come in here, they'll build their lists, and they'll email the hell out of me. And in a lot of cases, they will set up these automated follow-up sequences. When this happens to me, I will take those email addresses and set up a filter in our email to where they automatically go to the spam folder. So I never even see them. So now that person, by the nature of their action, automating stuff, they now go to my spam folder no matter what. So every time they send me anything, it's going to go into the spam folder. That's going to hurt their deliverability, and they're never going to be able to reach me again. So this is one that you absolutely want to avoid. There's time and a place for automation, but it's not when it comes to, pitching journalists. You don't want to do that. You want to instead focus on building relationships. So I'll give you a great example of this. Good friend of mine, she's a publicist as well. I had introduced her to a journalist here in the Tampa Bay area. I had known this journalist for a while, but I had just introduced the two of these ladies together. And she sent her a pitch, which was perfect on all counts, right? It was the topics that she covers. It was a timely story. It fit into what their editorial calendar looked like at that particular time. I happen to know this particular journalist quite well personally. And so I knew a lot of things that were going on in the newsroom there. So I knew that on all accounts, that pitch was perfect. And she had sent the pitch, got no response. Sent one follow-up, got no response. She didn't go past that. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks from the initial to the follow-up. Still got nothing. And me and this publicist were talking one day, and I said, "Oh, hey, by the way, what happened with that pitch that you sent to so-and-so?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I had sent it, and then I sent a follow-up, but I still haven't heard back from her." And I said, "Well, would you like me to reach out to her and see if I can make something happen for you?" She's like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I did that, but I did it in a very different way than she did because of the relationship we had, right? I just sent her a quick text message, gave her a couple of bullet points and a thumbs up or a thumbs down emoji. And she immediately responded back and said, "Yes, it's great. Fits something that I'm working on right now. Let's do it. Send me the information." Now, that happened because of the relationship that we had nothing to do with, sending any kind of automated follow-ups or anything like that. It was purely from the relationship. And that highlights the importance of building relationships, because when you do that, you're not having to worry so much about the follow-up, because it's not the follow-up, it's that they know and recognize you. And that is a game changer when it comes to public relations. Next one we're going to talk about is offering to pay journalists. So I have seen this happen before a lot of times. And I cannot say that I have never been guilty of this. In my much, much younger days, I have certainly tried this, and it almost never worked. But what I will tell you is there's a lot of problems with this. The first thing you want to look at, though, is how does the journalist see this? So if a journalist was to get caught accepting money for featuring somebody, what do you think is going to happen? Well, they're going to get fired. That's going to be an immediate thing. And it's probably going to be the type of situation where they're not going to be able to be hired by another outlet. So first of all, almost nobody is even going to take you up on this offer. But then the other thing is, think of that situation and think of then what the message is that you're telling them. You're offering to pay them for something that they would absolutely get fired for. So what you're telling them is basically that you think they have no integrity, first of all. And that's a huge problem, because if somebody told you that you had no integrity, how would you feel about that? You're not going to be super happy. You're not going to want to work with them. So you do this, you're going to hurt your chances with them, even if they say no and you guys continue talking. You're also telling them how much you think that they are worth to you. So if you're like, hey, I'll pay you $500, I'll pay you $1,000, I'll pay you $5,000, whatever that number is, it's irrelevant. You are putting a price on their livelihood, and they're going to take that personally, and look, rightfully so. They absolutely should. But here's what else is going to happen. They're probably going to talk to other journalists, other editors, other producers, anchors, everybody, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you guys will never see in the media industry. So if they start talking about people, and look, they're doing this for two reasons. One, they're doing it to out you. But two, they're doing it to protect themselves. This is a self-interest thing. If they are telling other people, hey, this person approached me and offered to pay me money to be featured. Now, and of course, they didn't feature you. Now they're insulating themselves. They're protecting themselves so that you can't come out and, make some kind of accusation. Well, people, of course, are going to spread the word because they don't want their friends to get hurt. Well, think about this now. Let's say you're a journalist, and let's say that person who offered to pay another journalist comes and pitches you a great story. Even if they did not offer to pay you, are you going to be excited about featuring them? Of course not. You're probably not going to do it because all of these other people have been talking about how this person tried to pay them. So they don't want to be associated with that because it's going to create this negative perception. It's going to create this idea that, hey, maybe that journalist is taking money, even if there's no evidence. So it can hurt them professionally and cause problems for their career. So you want to avoid this at all costs. You could very likely end up on a blacklist because of this, and it's going to hurt your efforts in ever getting featured in the media. So don't do this. There's no upside to it. It's all downside. And that's what I have to say about that one. All right. We're going to talk now about going on TV unprepared. So this is one of those cases where until you have actually done it, you never really know how well you're going to do or how poorly you're going to do, for that matter. Your first TV segment is always going to be a gamble. Now, in most cases, nobody's trying to play gotcha, right? They're trying to bring you on for a segment because you're an expert. They want you to share your knowledge. So typically it's going to be a fairly low stress interview, especially if it's a local media outlet and they're, with you on site somewhere. They got their cameraman, their reporter, they've got all this stuff, and they are interviewing you. You're probably going to have a chance to talk in a very low pressure environment. And, they can even go through parts of the conversation over and give you a chance to kind of restate your words. If you fumble, you stutter, you misspeak, whatever. That's usually very low pressure. You don't usually see like a big gotcha moment unless we're talking about something like politics or a PR crisis or something significant like that. So most of the time, this is not something you have to have huge worries about. But you've got two paths you can take here. All right. You've got underprepared and you've got overprepared. If you come out underprepared, the outcome of that is you look stupid. If you come out overprepared, then the outcome is you look robotic or scripted. Now, of those two, they're both not great, but of the two, I would much rather see you come off as robotic and scripted rather than stupid. So when I say over prepare, what I mean is, you're kind of memorizing a script, or you've got some very rigid bullet points and you're trying to stick to a very specific storyline. Instead, I want you to have a loose framework of kind of topics that you want to talk about. And if you go through these conversations, do some role play. This is something we do with our clients all the time. We will go through and act as that anchor and ask them questions. And then every now and then throw out kind of something out of left field, throw them something unexpected. And this gets them to the point where they're comfortable just having a conversation on the fly and not really worrying too much about the camera. But if you come in there underprepared, and I see people do this sometimes because they think, well, I don't want to seem stiff. I don't want to seem robotic. I want to just do this on the fly. I want to be natural. I don't want to prepare too much. What ends up happening is they get completely blindsided because they're not really ready. And I had a TV segment just, I think it was this past Monday with, it was a panel, and this happened with somebody who was not prepared, and it went, it didn't go well, let's say. When somebody asks you a question, you need to be able to quickly and effectively respond to that question. You have to be able to give them an answer that provides value and insight. And if you can't do that, it damages your credibility. So somebody is interviewing you on TV because you are the expert, right? You have insight into whatever this topic is that the average viewer does not have. They don't know your industry the way that you know it. So the idea here is you're going to be giving advice. You're going to be telling them about something that's going on, or something they should know about, or something they should do. So you have to be able to communicate that effectively in a way that somebody outside of your industry can understand. So if you cannot do that, it damages your credibility. Now, today we're in a world where all of the media is everywhere at all times. So whether it's TV, whether it's social media, whatever it is, if you botch it, that's going to live forever. I can't tell you how many clips I have of people absolutely botching things, even actual anchors who do this on TV all day for a living, right? It happens. But what happens then is that then goes on to live online forever. And in some cases, depending on how bad it is, it could actually become, that next viral video that goes out there because it's hilarious. There was a couple of examples, not so much somebody messing up, but I'm sure you guys have all seen the video of the guy being interviewed on BBC. And as he's talking, a baby walks in through the door to his office and comes up to to his desk. And that got shared all over the place. Same kind of thing happens if you mess up on a TV interview. There was a segment that I've used in several of my examples where a lady was, she was being interviewed on TV. Now, mind you, it's directly her. She's looking at the camera, but she's also got some notes down here. And she's like, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, bouncing her head all over the place. And she looked like she had taken a few too much of her Adderall medication for the day. But that's an example of something where professionals in the industry will then share that. Not professionals in your industry, but professionals in the media industry, right? We'll share it amongst ourselves. In some cases, because we think it's hilarious. In other cases, because we're using it as an example of what not to do. But in either case, you have to realize that a lot of other media people are seeing this. That's anchors, that's producers. And when they see this, they know that you're not really prepared for TV. And so it's going to make them a lot less likely to bring you on again. So this is something that you want to really make sure that you're smooth and you're natural. And this is something that you can deliver effectively, right? And then part of this that I want you guys to keep in mind is even if you botch it, yes, you can always recover from that. There's ways to do that. Of course, it's going to be a long path. You're going to have to do a lot of other things on video and get smooth and comfortable again before somebody's going to let you on. But that particular producer, that particular anchor that had you on that first time, they're going to be the hardest to win over because you botched it on their show, and that reflects on them. If you do find yourself in a situation like this, what I suggest doing is start going on a lot of video podcasts. The barrier to entry there is much lower. You can get onto a video podcast fairly easily. And then that gives you the opportunity to practice this. And now you're answering questions on the fly, but it's not just a tight little 3 to 5 minute segment. It's now a 30-minute, 45-minute, an hour long free-form conversation. And so you get half a dozen to a dozen of these under your belt after you've messed up. You can now demonstrate that you're proficient on video, right? And then from there, you can start reaching back out to try and get on TV again. So there's always a solution. That's the path if you find yourself in that situation, but avoid it in the first place by being prepared. All right. The next one we're going to talk about is the Forbes Council. So this is one of those things that I have a particular level of passionate hate for because it is not at all what it is presented as. And a lot of people, I feel, have been unfairly sucked into it, and that has hurt them in various ways. So if you're not familiar with the Forbes Council, essentially it is a program where you can pay a fee. I don't even know what that fee is. I think it's like around $3,000, something like that, to be able to write for Forbes magazine. Now, it's the digital version only, not the print version. But beyond that, it's not quite what it seems. So yes, it is listed on the Forbes domain, right? But it's not actually on Forbes. So first of all, it doesn't exist in the main Forbes site. So you can't go to just Forbes.com and see it listed amongst the other articles there. So if you publish an article under the Forbes Council, it's not going to appear in with the other articles. It's going to appear under your column, and that's it. So the only way to get to it is direct links. Even so much so that it doesn't show up in Google search either. It's not indexed. So that means in order for anybody to see any of those articles, they have to actually be given a link or find a link somewhere online, like on your website or on your social media, and click on it and go through. Otherwise, nobody's going to see it. The other issue here, though, is it's not actually even run by Forbes. It's run by a third-party company. And that third-party company, rather brilliantly, put in place a non-compete agreement. So what that means is if you go and you write for the Forbes Council, that means that you can now never, ever write for the actual Forbes publication. And that puts you in a really bad spot because you could be a great author. You could be doing this to elevate your status, but it's actually lowering it because it's not giving you the opportunity to write for Forbes. It's locking you into this kind of walled off garden that doesn't really do anything for you. And look, let's be honest. At this point, everybody knows that the Forbes Council is a pay-to-play program. If you can swipe your credit card and it clears, then you're going to be able to write for Forbes Council. There's no editorial vetting. They don't care if you are legitimate or not. So there's no credibility. There's no authority to it. And in fact, journalists actually hate this. And for all the same reasons that we talked about with those scam sites. They feel that it infringes on their livelihood. They feel that it devalues journalism, all of that. So it doesn't win you any points with them. And frankly, most people, even those who are not in the media industry today, know that Forbes Council is just a pay to play with no real vetting. So there's no value to it. I had an interesting situation with Forbes Council a few years ago with a client of mine who insisted on writing for them. And then he comes to me and says he wants to do a press release to announce that he was accepted into the Forbes Council. And I said to him, look, man, you don't want to do that because, nobody really gives a shit about the Forbes Council. There's no credibility. It doesn't help you in any way. And he's like, yeah, but then, I want to do a press release about it so that then I can say I was featured in, all these outlets. And I was like, look, putting out a press release is not being featured. That's syndicated, right? It goes out to the wire service, and then various other outlets will syndicate it, which doesn't mean that they're looking at it and saying, hey, this is a great story, let's put it out here. It's an automated feed that they publish everything from these wire services. So there's no real authority that comes from that. Well, he went on to do this on his own against my knowledge. And I did not know about this until mid-interview with a journalist. And what happened was he was being interviewed for a feature in US News. And at some point in the interview, she says to him, oh, hey, well, I see that you were featured in, XYZ, all these, several different outlets. Do you happen to have links to these so that I can take a look? Maybe we can use some of this for, background material on you and your company. And as soon as she said that, I knew what he had done. He had went out, put out this press release, and then slapped in his cover photo on his social media profiles, as seen in, with all these media logos. So as he starts stuttering and stammering and explaining what was going on, she says to him, oh, no, no, this all ends. This is done. She says, look, if my editor found out that I featured you and you're presenting yourself like this is completely dishonest. This is misrepresentation. She says, if I was to feature you knowing this, I would lose my job. So not only can I not feature you, but I have to tell my editor about this, and you're going to be blacklisted from this outlet. And she was a freelance journalist, so she did work for that outlet, but she also worked for New York Times and Wall Street Journal. So he was now blacklisted from 3 major media outlets and lost that feature. So things go really badly when you misrepresent yourself. And Forbes is a very classic case of misrepresentation. So we want to avoid that. There's really no upside to the Forbes Council, only downside to that. So stay away from it. Focus on demonstrating your knowledge through legitimate publications, even if they're much smaller, and then use that to work your way up into the publications through legitimate channels, not things like the Forbes Council, which is just pay to play. All right, so the last one we're going to cover here today is relying on press releases. So I will start off by saying I have always had a mixed opinion of press releases. I've used them from time to time throughout my entire career, going back 20 plus years, and they've evolved over the years. So back in the day, the way that it would work is you would put out a press release and it would go out through the wire services. Journalists would pick these up looking for the stories that they wanted to potentially cover. And then they would reach out to you if the story made sense, if it was a fit for them and what they were working on. A lot of people started abusing the hell out of press releases from an SEO perspective. There was a lot of people in that space that would put out a press release, every week or even more frequently, just for the links that it was creating. But pretty soon, as the internet evolved, the need for that went away, and journalists started getting their information for the stories that they were working on through other sources, social media being a huge part of that. So the effectiveness of press releases has really died down significantly. Now, there was a point where I felt that press releases were completely useless. I don't really think that anymore. Fortunately, a friend of mine had convinced me otherwise, somebody who's in the industry. And I had taken a second look at them several years ago and started utilizing them again. But the way that they work today is not the way that they worked, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So they can be effective, but it's not a thing where, don't expect to go put out a press release, no matter how well it's written, and just start getting a shitload of publicity coming from it, right? You're not just going to start getting organic features all over the place because you put that press release out there. What you will see happen is you put out the press release, you'll get some syndications out there, which is basically them taking that same press release and just publishing it on these various other news outlets, maybe something like AP or Bloomberg, local media outlets as well. And that's not the same as being featured, so never present it as such. But it does go out there. And typically it's not something, in a lot of cases, it's not something that's going to show up in the search results, right? If somebody searches for your company name or your personal name, they're not going to turn up as results. But it is something that people who are scrolling through the site may see. You could then use that piece of that syndicated piece and use that to go pitch, but don't think that you're going to get a ton of organic features out of it. A lot of journalists are not looking at the wire services, so they're not even going to see it, right? They're getting their ideas for their stories from social media. Look at something like X. Look at what's going on YouTube and TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn to a lesser degree. Journalists are looking to social media for their ideas. So what I would do is I would put out a press release, and then I would leverage that press release in your pitches. So what I do is get the great press release. It's well written, pitches your company in a great way. It's got all the information that they'll potentially need. And then you create a nice, tight, effective pitch. And you build a media list of the journalists who typically cover this type of content. And now what you're going to do is you're going to reach out to each of them individually. We're not going to do a mass email. We're going to reach out individually and pitch each of those journalists with that pitch tailored to them and their topic, right? What are they typically covering? How are they typically covering it? Tailor it to that. And then you've got your pitch, you've got a little bit of information. And remember, we're keeping this tight. But then you include a link to the press release, which has all of the information. And what you're doing is you're showing them a real quick summary of the story. And then you're letting them find all of the information. And this is a win because you're hooking them with the pitch, right? You're showing them the value, showing them why their audience would be interested in this. But then you're also taking the next step without overwhelming them in that email by providing a link to the press release where they can now go and see, hey, here's everything I need to write the story. Here's everything about the company. Here's everything about what we're doing, how this is working, And then here's all these industry statistics. Here's, some quotes from other people in the industry. Here's all this information that they can basically take and disassemble and rearrange to write their own article. So you're basically taking the work off of them, making things super simple for them, and giving them everything that they need to write that article. And that's how press releases work today. The thing I want to emphasize here, though, is do not ever position these syndications, right? Because it's going to go out to, like I said, maybe it goes out to the AP, maybe it goes out to Bloomberg, maybe it goes out to Fox Business, maybe it goes out to all the local news outlets in your city. Case in point, the wire service that we use, we typically see something in the range of, I think it's like 120, 130 different syndications. That's the ones we count. It, of course, syndicates out to a bunch more, but A lot of them, I think, are meaningless, right? It's just sites that are up just to take these press releases and try and generate some ad revenue. No real value to the content on them. So we only count about 120 or so of them. I forget what the exact number is, but those are syndications. Those are not features. So don't try to represent it as such, because that will hurt you with the journalists. Now, you can still use those in building credibility. You can still use it from that perspective, right? If a client is asking you about a particular thing that you solve, and that answer is in your press release, well, then yeah, grab that link to the AP where your press release is and share that with the client, right? That's showing your authority. That's showing your credibility. And it's got that name recognition of that outlet. But when you're talking to a journalist, don't position this as an organic feature, because A, it's not, and B, they can absolutely see this and they know that it's not. So you'll definitely hurt your credibility. Do not do that. Use it in the way that works today, right? We have to fight the battle that we have, not the one that we want. So the use of press releases has evolved. Use it in the way that works today. Don't try to force what used to work into today's model, because that's not going to work. All right, everyone. So that's going to be a wrap for today. We ran through a bunch of stupid mistakes that I see smart people make all the time when it comes to public relations. We've got another one of these type of episodes coming up next week, and it's going to be Friday, not the usual Wednesday. Got some travel going on that's impacting our normal schedule. So if you guys have some specific questions that you'd like me to answer, though, definitely drop us a comment. Let us know the questions you guys have, and we'll try to work them into some of the upcoming episodes as well. All right, everyone. So that's going to be a wrap for today. I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. And that's it.